March 11th, 2023 marks a year that I've been back in Spokane after 30 years of living in the Seattle area. I've said before in other videos, I was born in Spokane in 1971, Deaconess Hospital right there. And then I spent the next 4 years at Sacred Heart right over there with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. So I was very familiar with the hospitals here. In fact, I was in the emergency room yesterday I won't give you the details, but I was up all night. I never knew that I had as many orifices in my body that the healing systems in my body was trying to push liquids out of. All in all, the diagnosis was food poisoning from the pizza I ate, I've gotten food poisoning before. It's never made me feel, I've never had to go to the emergency room. To gastrointestinal disease, which could mean anything, half of which I probably already have. Or this thing called, is it the norovirus or the norovirus? I can't remember that. Let's see. It is a virus that's going around in hospitals right now. And the day before I got sick, I was getting blood work done at WSU. I don't know if it's the norovirus or norovirus. Norovirus, that's what it is. And I'll tell you what, you will contort yourself in positions to try and get whatever's in your stomach out that you may need medical attention for muscle strains and bone cracking, because I've never retched so hard in my entire life. One time I almost blacked out. And I was in the bathroom every 15 minutes from 11 o'clock at night until 10 in the morning when I decided it was time to go to the hospital. So a really wretched virus. Wretched. And so I've been eating Jell-O for the last day. And I'm unhappy about it. But I did get some coffee, which they said I shouldn't do. But they don't know my body like I know my body. And my body requires coffee. I've also said in a couple of videos past that it's been about a year and a half since I left church, Big C Church. How do I feel? I feel like I've been apart from my family, to be honest with you. There are lots of reasons why I stepped out of church. One of them was I felt called out of church for a time. In fact, the time frame was a year, so I'm six months past that. But I still have a great affinity for the church. In fact, based on everything I've experienced in the last year and a half, I'm putting together a little mini documentary about churches since COVID, how they operate, what some of their policies are. I'm not interested in there's not many doctrinal changes in church, but there is a lot of difference in the way church does things. There's people sounding the death knell of church after coronavirus. They don't know churches like I know churches. After 50 years in church, churches just don't go away. And I think that's a good thing. But there's a couple of churches that I'm interested in visiting here. And I'm not sure what capacity. I know that I won't be serving in church. The last time, Marysville Foursquare, which is where I went for about 12 years, and I served as a drummer, graphic designer. In fact, I branded the church, a cinematographer at that church for about 12 years. In fact, the first time I started playing drums in church was at the Rock of Ages Church, which is now, I think, Soho or Sodo. I think it's Soho. Went on a missions trip in Mexico City when I was 14, played drums there. But this church, I think Marysville Foursquare was the church that I got the most involved in. And so when I find a church here, I will probably not be going to serve at first, but just as kind of a casual observer to kind of get the feel. Because while I was going to church during COVID, and I went to a couple of different ones while I was still in M4, and it just felt very different. And for the 2 years after that, before I left, church never felt the same, period. And so I want to kind of go back and see what's similar, what's completely different, what the outreach is like, whether there's a focus on international outreach or neighborhood outreach, which is the one that's most important to me. I do think, based on the synagogal system in the first century, and this was before Paul got a hold of churches, it was based in the synagogal system, where the synagogue was the center of the community. These churches were open 24/7. They ran a lot of all of the benevolence, food for the poor, clothes for the poor, right there in their own communities, and they all knew each other. It's hard to do that in America because it's a very different culture than that. But it'd be interesting to see, and I've chosen 3. I've chose Life Center because Pastor Aaron, who is the pastor of Marysville Foursquare, actually started at Everett Life Center. So I'm going to go to the Spokane Life Center. I think it's out on Government Way. Check that church out. Right down, I live on Broadway, actually right in the shadow of the courthouse. And Christ the Redeemer church is right down the road from me, so I'm going to stop there. But there's one that I used to walk by every day when I would go to the smoke shop. And it's called True Hope. I would walk by, and sometimes on Sunday, people would come out, and hang out by their cars when service was over. And I got a good feeling about that church. So I'm gonna sneak in there. Well, I won't sneak in. I'll just walk right in the front door, have a seat, and get to. Again, this isn't to critique churches. That phase of my life is long over. I just want to go get the feel, and the most important thing to me is the community of people. I'm looking for places I want to see active work in Marysville. It used to be called CR, Celebrate Recovery. The funny thing about that is my father, before he passed, I didn't know that because I lived in Seattle, he lived in Spokane. I guess he was on the board of directors for Celebrate Recovery. I didn't know that. Someone I didn't even know told me that. Oh, is your dad Don Silver? So I want to see a lot of work in addiction recovery, which is absolutely imperative now. And I don't mean addiction recovery where you send people and you make them go to chapel, and then they can get food, and then they can have a place to sleep, but only if they go to chapel, kind of like the Union Gospel Mission, which I'm not a big fan of, for that reason alone. I don't think we should do bait and switch. But, maybe I'll go in there and see if I'm wrong. I have, when I was growing up, before I went on a mission trip to Mexico City, when I was 14, we had to go to Riverfront Park, and we had to witness to a certain amount of people and satisfy our handlers before we could go to Mexico City. So I have a lot of experience missionizing in Spokane, and I'll tell you, I will never do it again. There's a guy, an Australian guy. The guy really pisses me off, and I want to punch him on it. I want to talk to him, and he's down there all the time on Sundays telling people how horrible they are. And when people start to challenge him, he gets really aggressive and angry. And I'm like, yeah, that's Jesus, all right. Jesus got aggressive and angry with the spiritual leaders at the time, not the people on the streets. Let's just be clear about that. Hypocrites, den of vipers, their father's the devil, their mouth like whitewashed tombs. These are things that you put on the cross. So Jesus was plenty cranky, but never at the people. In fact, he got more angry with his disciples than he did the people. But the one group the demographic that he never went out after and only celebrated was children. And that's really what we're going to talk about in the upcoming video about how to see heaven. You won't see it unless you become like a child.